Hello, my name's Carolina Jackson-Ward. I'm Product Manager for Projectplace, and I will talk to you today about effective leadership for value-driven teams. So first, let me go through the agenda. I want to start by talking about some background stuff. When I talk about value-driven teams, I come from a background in Lean and Agile, focusing on delivering value to customers as quickly as possible in a changing world. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means. And then I'll go on to talk about what motivates people and why, as a leader, should you care about motivating staff. Then moving on to how we shape behavior, some best practices, and how you can do it, and how everyone can be trained. And metrics. Metrics are really important, and how you deal with metrics will decide whether or not you can achieve what you want to achieve. And then finally, maybe the most exciting part of all is the role of the leader. As a leader, you're incredibly important. Many people say that successful people are people who have good leaders and people who are good leaders. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means and what your role is. And I talk about leaders and leadership as opposed to managers and managing work, because this is not about work breakdown. This is about getting teams that self-organize and deliver. So the background for Lean is, of course, Toyota. Lean is based on the Toyota management system, which came from a need of having a very, very efficient organization because of restraints after the war in Japan, restraints on space and restraints on access to resources. So the guiding principle in Lean is to be able to deliver the current or more value to your customers while minimizing effort and waste.
Carolina, would you like to hear the results of the poll?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. 47% said I had a basic knowledge. You had 28%, I'm curious, tell me more. A good working knowledge at 20%, lean, question mark, agile, question mark, 5%, and I'm a lean or agile expert as 1%.
Okay. Well, that's so funny, because I've been talking about this subject for a few years now, and that's really been a shift. When I first started talking about it, very few people knew anything about Lean and Agile, but now it's usually around 50% that have at least a working knowledge of what it means. So back to Lean. Minimizing effort, minimizing waste, and while delivering the same or more value to the customers. It's important to know who your customer is. Sometimes that can be a bit confusing for organizations, especially if you sit in middle management or in projects. Who is your customer? Is it the person who will consume the deliverables in your project, or is it your group of stakeholders? And it's important for you to understand who the customer is in order to have success. Another principle of Lean is Kaizen, which is continuous improvement and continuous learning in a structured and organized way. So you set aside time to improve your processes, you set aside time to learn from previous testing cycles. Also, there's a lot of use of visual management tools, controlled by transparency. When you visualize, flows inside the organization become more clear, and it's easier to identify bottlenecks, to identify problems, and to shape behaviors. So visualizing work is a very powerful way of finding out where your problems are and also your strengths. Standardization is something, in order to to work with the processes, you need to have a standard or at least a current situation to start from, because otherwise it's hard to learn. You don't know if you're improving unless you know where you're coming from. Jidoka is one of the pillars of Lean, and it means, it's Japanese of course, it means right from me, which means that I will not hand over to the next part of the process if there's a quality problem in mine. Jidoka, which means right from me, it means that I won't actually give anything to the next step in the process if it's not right. And at Toyota they have these lights and they're called andon. It's a very well-known thing from the Toyota factory, which means that anyone on the production line can signal the light, which means there's a problem in my station and they will come and help, and if the problem is not solved, the whole production line will stop until the problem is solved. And to transfer that to other environments means that I have to be sure that what I hand over to the next step is correct, to the best of my knowledge. And communication. We need to talk about where we're going, how we're improving, how we're learning, and how we're handing over. So on to Agile. This image is, it's obviously a high jumper, and what you do is you jump quite a few times in high jumping. It's important to have as much strength as possible to your final jumps, which are the ones that are really the most important. So you want your margin to be as small as possible in each jump. You need to have as little effort as you possibly can while still getting over the bar. So Agile is basically started with Lean, but Agile comes from, well, Lean comes from production, Agile comes from software development. And one of the problems that developers found was that you started the project, you had requirements. By the time you finished developing, the requirements no longer fitted reality because technology moves so fast. So Agile is a way of reacting to and navigating in an uncertain and continually changing reality, with strong elements from Lean, particularly when it comes to waste reduction. And in software development, waste is so often described as developing and implementing features that are later not used. It's built on self-organizing teams. The team is the smallest unit in Agile, and they should have all the competence they need to make decisions on the fly. And another element is rolling wave planning, which means that because reality is continually changing and uncertain, you don't plan far ahead. You have a rough plan in the long term, and then you do the detailed planning as you go along. And in Agile, you say, rather than saying that change is bad, you welcome change, because change means that we're doing something better than we would have otherwise. And the focus is on value, fast return on investment, and fast learning. So you do MVP, a minimum viable product, you release it to be able to learn as fast as possible from real users. And these types of organization require a different type of leadership than traditional management. One thing is that the leadership needs to be operational. It needs to be there. You can't shut yourself in a corner office. You need to be there to clarify the goals continually, to shape behaviors continually. You need to start being a coach. At Toyota, there's a coach in every step of the hierarchy, and they have a quite complicated hierarchy. There's a coach for the team, there's a coach for that coach, and then as you move up along at the top, you have the lean gurus that coach management, top management, the executive, the president. And the coaching leadership is about asking questions, about managing conflict, and also to enable this learning, the Kaizen, the continuous improvement process, to be a support in there. You need to be a visionary. You need to carry the values of the organization, make sure that they're there all the time, and to motivate the team, and transparent, to communicate, visualize, and support the judoka. It's a good thing if people say that there's a problem. You should encourage people to come and talk to you about problems, because like one of my friends who's a leader in another organization said, I love it when people come to me with small problems, because small problems are easy to solve. It's when they're hidden and they become big that they become a headache. So if we move on to the next section about motivation, I'm going to recommend this speech by Dan Pink on motivation. It's available on YouTube. You can go and check it out. I wish I had time to show you the whole thing, but I won't. So it's a recommendation to go and listen to him talk a bit about the research behind what it is that motivates people. And why is it important to motivate people? There's a lot of problems in an organization caused by low motivation. One is turnover of staff. Staff is, within any organization, the only asset that you have that appreciates. So losing experienced staff means that you have to hire somebody with less knowledge and less skill about the particular situation that you're in. So turnover of staff is expensive, and you want to avoid it. And another thing that's caused by low motivation is absence. If you wake up in the morning and you don't really feel like going to work, there's a greater chance that you won't than if you wake up and you're totally excited about what you're going to do today and what you're going to bring to the world. And low motivation also causes low quality, because if you don't feel motivated about what you're doing, you're going to do just enough. You're going to do just enough to get away with it and then move on to something that excites you more. And all of this together is waste. So low motivation causes waste. It causes people to do things that are not related to work while they're working. It causes people to drive towards other things in their lives other than work. Something that a lot of companies do to increase motivation is bonuses. Bonuses work well, especially if you have repetitive work that requires only mechanical skill. So if you tell somebody to fill in a hole and give them money incentive to do it as quickly as possible, then that's going to work really, really well. Most of us, though, we don't have work and we don't offer work that requires only mechanical skill. And as soon as the task calls for cognitive skill, then bonuses actually become counterproductive. This is not something that we invented now. We've known this for a long time, that they're actually negatively correlated. So the bigger the bonus, the worse the performance. It seems counterintuitive, but it's like our brains get focused on the bonus rather than what we're trying to achieve. So part of our cognitive skill goes towards focusing on the money rather than on the result. And the three factors that we've found that lead to better performance plus personal satisfaction are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, to have some sort of influence over how the work is performed. Mastery, to feel that you have the skills or can acquire the skills necessary to achieve the thing that you want to achieve. And purpose, that you feel that the goal actually has some sort of personal meaning to you. What we've found, and that's quite interesting, or you can look anywhere, but highly skilled, highly motivated people will actually spend lots of time after work doing exactly the same thing that they get paid for in their workday, but they'll do it for free, and they'll share their results with the world for free. And a lot of great software has evolved that way. A lot of volunteering is built on, but if people feel that they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose, they will spend a lot of time chasing their goals. Some of the motivation killers that are out there are micromanagement, which is the opposite of autonomy, right? You get somebody come in and detail for you how you should do your work. Obscurity. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I don't know how my work connects with that higher purpose. And mistrust. So if you, it's funny because trust is one of those things. If you mistrust someone else, there's could be reason for it, but it could also drive them to behave in ways that leads you to not trust them. So that can become a negative spiral. And if you want to boost motivation, like we talked about, autonomy, clear and communicated targets, connected to some sort of higher purpose, usually satisfying your shareholders as a company will not typically be a purpose for your staff. So try to find something. How are we making the world better? What is it in our work that makes the world a better place? Usually, in any organization, there is purpose. And self-organizing teams let people work out the best way for them to collaborate and achieve that goal. And like I said, visualization of work is a powerful motivator to be able to see what the work looks like, who's in charge, how are we achieving this together. It's also a great tool. A Kanban board like this one in Projectplace is a great tool to see what the behaviors are like. You can see straight away if the work is moving on or if it gets stuck somewhere and why. But you also need to connect that to some sort of customer value that your team can understand. So I can see my work detailed, and then it can be connected to the higher value, which is described here, for instance, that the customer in this case is a portfolio user, and they need to see timelines for more than one project at a time. So it's a clearly communicated customer value, and I know these little cards here, they're connected to that goal. So I can see how the work that I'm performing right now is connected to some sort of value to the customers. On to shaping behaviors. What does that mean? Well, it's kind of brainwashing, or like raising children, or like I like to say, like training a dog. I have a dog myself. Clicker training is a fairly recent way to train animals. And the fantastic thing about clicker training as opposed to more traditional methods is that not only can you train the kinds of animals that we typically have been good at training, like dogs, but you can train cats that were previously thought that you couldn't train. You can train horses with clickers. you can basically train any kind of mammal. I don't know if it stretches beyond that, but any kind of mammal can be trained with clickers, including humans. And what it is that you tie all the positive hormones that we get from some sort of trigger to a behavior. So when you get the behavior you want, you click. And for dogs, you start by teaching them that the click is something positive. You give them a treat every time you click. And that means that the biological response from the treat, which means they get happy, right? They get serotonin and all of those happy hormones. They get triggered by the clicking. So positive reinforcement. For people, we are communicators, so it's usually good to communicate what you expect first by using some sort of common values, using the positive reinforcement, and then once you have that, you also get a lot of other things as a positive side effect. You get strong interpersonal ties that build a foundation to facilitate when you do have a problem and you do need to give negative feedback. So every time you use positive reinforcement, you're also building the foundation that makes it easier, the foundation and the trust that makes it easier to deal with negative behavior. So let me talk a little bit about values as people in this organization. This is not about company vision or mission or anything like that. This is about how we behave. So it's interesting to know, because usually when you talk about values, they're focused on how do we behave towards others, typically our customers or our suppliers or others once outside. But I believe that values should deal primarily with how we are functioning together as a group. And because if we can solve how we function together inside the building or the office or the project team or whatever it is that we have, we will usually behave the same way towards our customers and our suppliers and our stakeholders and other people outside. So it's very much about building a common foundation to stand on.
Looking at the results of the poll, Carolina, you had an 80% on yes and 20% on no, and that's out of 86% vote.
Wow, good, great group. So I recommend when you talk about values that you start by doing an inventory of how do we function at the moment. So where are we now? And where would we like to be, and make the values a mixture of the two. What are the strong things that we don't want to lose, and what are some of the other things that we should work on? And it's also good to make concrete examples. Like at Projectplace, we have a value that is I'm straightforward. And what does that mean? Does it mean that I have to be blunt? And what is the difference between being straightforward and being blunt? And how does that relate to being polite? And to make those examples very, very concrete and give examples of this is being straightforward and this is not, for instance. This is something else. This is just being plain rude. So concrete examples, because the words themselves, when it comes to values, can be tricky. Because being straightforward might mean one thing to me and something completely different to my colleague. And there's a great blog post about culture called something along the lines with "The fish don't know its water." And it's about how when you are ingrained in one culture or one set of values, because that's really what a culture is, it's a set of values, it becomes difficult to see that it's a set of values because they become so much a part of you that you can't really see that they exist. until they get bounced against somebody else's culture. So concrete examples is a great way of making sure that we're talking about the same thing. Once you have the values in place, and it's good when you set up a new group to maybe spend a little time at the beginning just laying the foundation, right? Talking about what values do we have? Is it important to be on time? Is it important to work a certain number of hours a week? What is important to us as a group? Is it important to communicate clearly, and how do we do that? Once you have that, then you can start with a positive reinforcement as a leader, because this is a fundamental part of the leadership, is to shape behavior. One of the reasons that focusing on positive behavior is so powerful is that positive behavior drives out negative behavior, and this is literally like every dog training course I've been to with my dog focuses on this, and it is not only for dogs, it is the same with people. You can go home and try this with your children. If they have a negative behavior that you want them to stop with, then sit down and think, what would I like them to do instead, and start premiering that. So the positive behaviors will literally drive out the negative behaviors so that you don't have to focus so much on them. And it's much nicer, and it's much more energizing for everyone to work with positive behavior. So it works by driving out negative behavior and shaping much quicker. Rewarding positive behavior is a much quicker way of changing behavior than punishing negative behavior. Punishing negative behavior fosters hostility and distrust and all sorts of other problems, whereas positive reinforcement really has no negative side effects. The only thing that can happen is that people go around and they're too happy, and I don't see that as a problem. But it works. But you need to do it, of course, not just go around and be happy chappy, but focus on something that you really, as a leader, would like to see more of in this team. Maybe you have a problem with people not communicating enough what they're doing to you. It's a typical leadership problem. I'm not quite sure what my guys are spending their time on. So I want them to communicate to me. So I sit down and I say, okay, I'll focus on this for the team right now. And then every time somebody communicates, like here in a conversation post, Lisa has shared what she's doing. So I like that. Or I go, well done. It doesn't have to be in the software. It can also just be verbal. But you want to identify the behaviors that you want, and then you want to reward those as often as possible, and you want to make the rewards small. I mean, you don't want to buy cake and champagne every time somebody shares a piece of information with you. So often, small, preferably public, whereas negative reinforcement should be taken one-on-one, but public praise is a powerful clicker for people, and direct, immediate. Same as with children, same for adults. Yeah? As soon as possible after you've seen the behavior, because then the biology works so that we as humans will link the reward to the behavior. So I do this, I feel good. So think clicker when you work with positive reinforcement. And then we come to the sad part. No, but you will also, of course, as a leader, need to deal with problems, especially problems when people go outside the values. So use those values as, I like to call them a fence, yeah, that they sort of they're the perimeter. Inside that, you can usually let people, the awesome staff that you have, do the thing that they're there to do. They're the experts on whatever it is that they're supposed to contribute with, and then you can use those values as a fence to make sure that we know what is inside and what is outside, and that also makes negative feedback easier. So build a foundation with a positive reinforcement, with your presence, with your coaching, a foundation of trust and of positive feelings that makes it easier to deal with the negative when you have to. Use the values as a fence and choose your fights, just like I try to choose my fights with my teenage children. Choose your fights with your co-workers, because you might not have to deal with everything, but you want to have enough of that foundation left, that trust left, when it's time to deal with the big stuff. And timing is really important. And let me talk a little bit about stress. There are various components in stress, and there's a lot of research on stress, and it's now the tide is turning slightly in the sort of psychological community towards positive stress being something good for us, that stress that we can manage. But when I talk about stress now, I mean the negative stuff, the stuff that causes you to go into, that triggers fear in you, or feelings of not being able to cope. And that kind of stress actually influences our biology. So as soon as that type of stress, your adrenaline, your cortisol, that system, when that starts, then the first thing, because that means that your organism gets ready to run away from that saber-toothed tiger. That's the biological link that we have. And your body will then shut down the functions that are not necessary for running away from the saber-toothed tiger. One of those functions is your brain. Your brain, your digestive system, those things will get less resources from your body, and your muscles will get more resources. So when people are in that kind of stressful situation, it's not a good time to give them negative feedback. And when you're being stressed, it's not a good time to give negative feedback. So please, before you deal with the negative feedback, do a quick check of where am I at the moment? Am I stressed? What do I need to do to get out of that stress and be able to deal with it? And how are my staff doing? And this screenshot is from Projectplace. We have a function where you can describe to your manager how you're feeling about your workload at the moment. You see this little red dot on all of those people. All of those people are feeling under pressure right now. So maybe now is not the best time to give Erkan some negative feedback. Maybe I, as a leader, should go and talk to him about what we can do to reduce the pressure on him, and then I can deal with whatever problem it is that I'm having with him at the moment. Now we're moving on to metrics. Okay, metrics are super important. You need to know, especially as a leader, you need to know how it's going. I mean, you need to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. But one of the problems with measurement is that you can get trapped in just measuring. And this is another TED talk that I recommend, Yves Moriot. And it talks about the correlation between having too many rules or too many measurements and productivity. And he has a great example in this that I'm going to steal with pride from him, and it's about the women's relay race. I can't remember now which year it was, but on the paper, the American team was outstanding. If you looked at the metrics, they had the two best female runners in the world at the time on 100 meters. It was 4 by 100 meters relay. And the other two were not bad. And he's French, so the French team, it was, you know, a good team. Of course, they were in the final, but on paper, nothing like the American team. But still, the French won because they had done something that the American team hadn't. The American team had focused on each individual runner, and the French team had focused on the one metric that is important in a relay race, which is getting the baton from start to finish as fast as possible. It's not about how fast each individual racer is, it's about how fast the baton can move from start to finish. So I recommend that you look at this because often a problem that we have with metrics is that we measure the wrong thing. We don't measure value to customer. We measure something else. And we have too many KPIs, or we have KPIs that don't go together. And often we get measured or we get bonuses on things that we cannot influence as individual workers, which means that it's also a motivation killer. I'm being measured on something that I cannot directly influence. Or even worse, we don't even know what we're being measured on. So a solution to that is to pick one metric. What is our most important metric right now? Or maybe two, but I would recommend to pick one and make sure that it's something that you can control in your group. And then connect that to the overall target or the vision or the mission. Also decide, when do we celebrate? When do we bring out the cake and champagne, or we take an afternoon off and go and do something else? So when is our next target? When are we there? And visualize it, make it obvious if we're moving in the right direction, because that's also how we can learn. Then we can test and we can measure and we can learn. So this is one example. So this is a cycle time chart. So the KPI is to get the cycle time under 8 days again, for instance. This is something that the team can control. They can control how long it's going to take them to finish a card. It's a singular metric, and it's visual. You can follow this every day. So what is your job then as the leader here? I'm going to say that the job as a leader is the most important job, because we can talk about lean, we can talk about agile, we can talk about delivering value, but if we don't have the leadership to let the team focus on what they need to focus on, then it's never going to happen. So it all starts with you as leaders. You need to educate, you need to make sure that everybody knows what it is that we're trying to achieve, who is the customer, what is our goal, what value are we bringing to them, what are our core values, how should we behave towards each other. And you need to be the leader, you need to lead the way. You need to make sure that you are an example for others to follow. You know, if your core value is that we work 8 hours a day, I don't personally think that's a good core value, but it's a good example. If we say that we work 8 hours a day and then you as a leader work only 6 because I'm the boss, how many do you think will work for like 7 hours even in a team like that? So you need to lead by example. If we're being straightforward, then you need to be straightforward. If we communicate clearly, then you need to communicate clearly. And you need to listen. I used to work as a coach. It's a really nice job because basically that's what you do. You listen, active listening. You sit there because usually people, especially when they come to you, they're the expert on the situation, they're the expert on themselves, and they're the expert on the problem that they have. But your job as a coach, as a coaching leader or a coaching manager, is to listen and ask the right questions to make that person discover for themselves what they need to do to move on. And you need to create calm for your team. Your team needs to be able to focus on their job, which is to actually execute and deliver value. And you need to make sure that they're safe, that you have them to build that trust in you. If it's storming in the organization or in the stakeholder group and you know about it, it's your job to make sure that that storm does not affect your team so that they can still focus on what they need to focus on. And then communicate, communicate, communicate. You cannot communicate enough. You need to communicate the goals, you need to communicate the values, you need to communicate the KPI, what we're striving towards, how is it going. And that's a huge part of your job as a leader, is to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. And because you're usually only one person, or you are only one person, you need to make sure that the communication can also flow even if you're not there. So make sure that you have the team, but that there's also a possibility for them to communicate amongst each other and to maybe communicate with the stakeholders, but in a trusting way, on a platform where we know what's being said, we know what decisions are being made, and we know who makes them. And then I want to talk a little bit about the improvement kata. This is from Jeff Leiker, who's a lean guy, lean management. I don't know what his formal. He's a guru. He's written many books on lean management. And I like it to the film Groundhog Day. I don't know if you've seen it with Bill Murray, where he lives the same day over and over and over again. And what he does different things. So basically each day for him is a new test cycle. Yeah, he wakes up in the morning, the exact same thing happens, and then he tries new solutions to his problem every day. So a kata is a method for learning. It comes from Japanese martial arts, where you learn movements by breaking them down into small pieces and then executing those small pieces, learning each small piece and repeating it until it's basically ingrained into you. And the improvement kata is a method for learning and improving and this cycle of learning. So what you first need to know, and you need to know this as a leader and you need to communicate it clearly to your team, is to know the overall goal or vision of the project or of the organization. And if you don't know it, find out. And then you need to understand where you are. Because if we don't know where we are, we don't know which direction we need to move in, and we don't know how far we've come. So we need to know the starting point. And then set up the next target. So what is our next target on the road to that overriding goal or vision? And then the actual cycle begins. So you test something. You measure it against the desired result, which is the target. And then you see, did it go well? Was it successful? Then repeat it to make sure it wasn't a fluke. If it didn't go so well, test something different. So you test, learn, and adapt in cycles. until you reach the next target. And this is what it looks like when you have an incremental path. And this is very much what we talk about in sort of agile software development. We have a vision, we have an idea of what kind of value we want to bring to the world. And then we have our current situation, and then we have the next step, which for a software development team would be like the minimum viable product. And then you experiment until you get to that target. And that's where you do your planning, is for the next experiment, the next cycle. And as a leader, your job is to drive this improvement, to be at the forefront here. So some of the tips that I would like to give to you as leaders is to learn basic coaching skills, learn how to listen, it's a skill, learn how to ask the right questions, it's another skill, and learn to learn. Learning is actually painful for the brain. They've done tests on brains, and in most people, the brain will respond with pain, the same response as pain. The same areas of the brain light up when you're learning new things, which is why change is actually physically painful. People who are highly educated don't have the same response to change and to learning, and that's because they have taught themselves how to learn and how to embrace change. So you need to learn, and you need to teach your team how to deal with change and how to embrace that. And a great way to acquire these skills and to learn is to find somebody whose leadership style you like, or who is a great leader or a great coach, and ask them to be your mentor or ask them to be your coach. Usually people are flattered and happy to take on somebody. And you also need to understand something about yourself. You need to understand, when do I get stressed? What are my responses to threat? And how can I break some of the negative behavior that I have? How am I afraid of conflict? How can I learn to deal with that? Am I being perceived as aggressive? How can I soften my approach? So understand who you are and your own personal obstacles, and deal with them first. Because again, the fish and water, if you don't understand how your own person is and what triggers you, it's very, very hard to coach others. And then do the same thing with your leadership as in any other process. Test, learn, adapt, give yourself positive reinforcement, when you do things good. So start working with yourself and develop yourself as a leader.
What about 5S or Y or 5 Ys? These are useful too.
Yes, great. Thank you for bringing those up. I love those. 5 Ys are a way of getting to the source of a problem. So it's not enough to analyze why in the first step. So the 5 Ys. So you ask why 5 times. You say, okay, you're late with your delivery. Why? And then you get one answer. And then you go, okay, I understand. It's because somebody else delivered late to you. Why did that happen? So the 5 Ys is a way of finding the source of a problem. Great that you brought that up. I think it's a wonderful technique.
How does this work when working with an external client?
Well, you can always ask why. And if you're working Agile, if you have a client that is used to being working with Agile projects, they know that they should be involved to get the result that they want. They need to be involved in the process and available to answer questions and let you dig deeper into the needs to get the best results for them.
Okay. We have a question from Daniel. What is the name of the software package? Is it free?
I work for Projectplace. We're a part of PlanView that you see, but the software is Projectplace, and there's a free version for of the Kanban board tool. You can have that free. You go to projectplace.com and you can sign up for a trial there.
You say it's important to motivate staff, but one of Dan Pink's arguments is that you cannot motivate someone. What you can do is create the conditions in which people are motivated to tap into their intrinsic motivation. That's a argument or question from Stephen.
Yes, that's right, Stephen. I mean, but you can kill their motivation, or you can create an environment that fosters motivation. You cannot change their basic ideas about life, but hopefully, I mean, they're working with something that they are interested and motivated in the first place. And if they're not, if, for instance, they would rather be doing something completely different with their life, then maybe then is a good time to talk about why they're there. Why do they choose this line of work to start with, and find some intrinsic motivation for them that got them to sign up for this in the first place.
I'm not sure how much time we have there is a lot of questions. I'm going to go with one more and see how far we can go. Please provide a practical example methodology of driving out negative behavior when team morale and trust in leadership is very low. It's a question from Wise.
Yeah. So you're saying that you want to build trust. Trust is a currency, and you can think about trust as a bank account. Yeah, you have a trust balance. If you've been taking out of that trust for a long time, then you have a negative bank balance, and you need to start depositing into that account. So you need to start building trust. And what is it? You can ask people, yeah, I feel like you don't trust me. Is that true? So make sure you have a check that this is the problem, and then ask, what can I do to increase your trust in me? What is it? Can we find behavior that you would like from me? And can we talk about what behavior I would like from you to build trust? So communicate around trust, if that is a problem, and find out together what are the positive behaviors that we need to start depositing into that account. But if you have a negative balance in the account already, it's going to take a while, and you have to accept that you cannot build trust overnight. So find out, again, talk about what values do we have, how do we build trust, what are the concrete examples of situations where we can show trust, and start rewarding those.
Do you think, it's from Merv, do you think that the techniques you describe translate well to virtual teams? I know you have traveled to Bangalore.
Yes, I think it works well with remote teams. I think you need a bigger tool set to work with remote teams. I think you need to spend some time face-to-face, at least initially, to get the trust and the values. That work, I would recommend that you do face-to-face. But once you have that, once you have a good foundation, then working remote is not a problem. But you need different tool sets. You need to make sure that you have maybe digital Kanban boards rather than physical, for instance. So you need a different tool set to work remotely. But this is my first time in Bangalore. I've worked with these guys for 7 years. And I think we have a quite high level of trust. Most of them I met at some point over the years, but it works well to work remote. But you need different tool set, and you need to make sure that you are even more clear when you communicate. So make sure that all the communication is there. It's so easy to forget those remote workers when you also have people on site. So you talk about something around the coffee table or over the water cooler, and then you don't document it and you don't share it with the rest of the virtual team. So it's important to be disciplined about communication when you have remote teams.